While operating an application software is tested prior to release, over the years, many more undetected flaws have been found in production software by both testers and hackers. While we don't normally worry about unknown flaws, we do need to be aware of those known flaws or vulnerabilities that exist in our systems. There's not a great deal we can do about the 0-day period. Unfortunately, too often, vulnerabilities are not detected as soon as they should be, and this leads to an extended period of user risk, which encompasses the time from the start of the 0-day through to when the patch is finally applied. Keeping track of what vulnerabilities exist in our systems and what to do about them is made fairly straightforward by using vulnerability scanners. In this module, we'll install and take a first look at one of those, the Nessus vulnerability scanner. Nessus is produced and supported by Tenable, and a home use version is available for free download from their website at www.tenable.com. Nessus is not only a software package, but it's also a subscription service, which provides access and regular update to the thousands of modules that Nessus uses in its library. These modules are called plugins and are small software routines used by Nessus to check for specific vulnerabilities. We're at the Tenable website, so let's select the link to Support and Training and the Nessus download. There are 4 versions of Nessus. We'll select Nessus Home. The Home version is limited to 16 IP addresses per scan and doesn't include the features required for compliance checks. However, it's a pretty good start to allow us to run a basic check for known vulnerabilities. From here we can download the software. I'll do that now. There's one further action we need to take before leaving the website, and that's to visit the plugins site and register to obtain an activation code. We'll register for the free home user subscription. Let's do that now. Now I've installed the software, I need to get it set up for use. Let's get started. I've already populated my administrative account details, so we can proceed. Now I need to enter the activation code, which I received via email. I'll paste that in and go next. The next thing to do is download plugins. Okay, so the plugins have loaded and Nessus is now initializing. There we go. That's it, and we're now ready to use Nessus. I'll use the credentials I created when we installed Nessus to authenticate. Nessus presents its main console with 3 menu items: Scans, Schedules, and Policies. On the right of the screen, there's also a Tools drop-down and a bell symbol, which is a notification log. Let's do a quick tour of the drop-down options by clicking on it. And we see there are 5 options: User Profile, Settings, Help and Support, What's New, and Sign Out. Let's look at a couple of these. When we select User Profile, Nessus presents a screen with 3 sub-options: Account Settings, Change Passwords, and Plugin Rules. We'll check them out, but there's no reason to change any of these. I would note that Plugin Rules allow me to override the criticality of any specific plugin. This is a capability for advanced Nessus users, which we don't require for this module. Settings presents 6 sub-options, and at the top right links to register Nessus and to upload plugins. The register link is used to enter a new registration code. We may want to do this to upgrade from a home to a commercial feed, but I don't need to do this right now. Upload plugins is an advanced feature used to contribute locally created plugins. We won't be creating new plugins during this module. Take a look at users. We can see the current user account that we set up when we installed Nessus, so let's go ahead and create a new user. I'll click on the New button and enter Scanman as my new username, and then enter a password twice. I can leave the user type as standard and press Save. We now have a second user. Mail Server lets me configure my email server details if I want to email out the scan reports from scheduled scans. I don't need to do this right now. The Plugin Feed sub-option sets up custom plugins from a third-party source, and this is typically used in companies which download feeds to an internal server for offline distribution to Nessus clients. The Proxy sub-option is used in the corporate environment when access to the internet is via a proxy server. And finally, the Advanced sub-option is used to configure many of the parameters which control how Nessus operates. We'll stick to the defaults in this module. Okay, let's select Scans and return to the main screen. Before we run a scan, there are a couple of things we need to do. Firstly, let's set up a new folder for our scan results called Raspbian Cluster. I'll do that by clicking on the new folder link. The next thing we need to do is set up a scan policy. This is a description of the scan we wish to run without details of the target. We can then use this policy as many times as we want on as many targets as we like. Let's select the Policies link from the main menu bar. We see there are no policies defined at the moment, so let's add one. I'll click on the New Policy button. Nessus provides 12 policy wizards to select from when we're creating a new policy. Let's select Credentialed Patch Audit. I'll call this Patch Check. And let's keep the visibility as private and call this Regular Check for Pi Patches. I'll then select SSH for my authentication method and enter the user ID and password. This is the administrator account for the Raspbian systems. We're just fine with using a password for home use as it's encrypted when it's stored, but in a production environment with a large number of servers we may need to use SSH keys instead. Scrolling down, I'll set Elevate Privileges With to sudo. This will allow Nessus to connect and run elevated commands through secure shell on the Raspbian host. Let's press Save, and we've got our first policy. Let's explore the policy we've just created. If I double-click on the policy name, Nessus will display the first page as we configured it. However, note at the top right there's a new link called Advanced Mode. Let's select that. We can ignore the warning because we haven't made any changes. I now have more options available on the left, and there's one particularly useful option to look at, plugins. When I select this, we can see all the plugin families with indications of which are enabled for this policy, and the count of the number of individual plugins. We can see as we scroll down the Debian local security checks. When I click on it, it expands out to show the individual plugins on the right hand of the panel. So now we know just how much work the Nessus scanner will do for us. That's a lot of checks. Let's cancel from here. We don't need to modify the policy at this stage. Okay, now it's time to run a vulnerability scan. Let's select Scan from the main menu bar. We can see on the left a list of folders, including the folder Raspbian Cluster that we created. At this point I haven't carried out any scans, so the folder list on the right is empty. I'll press New Scan. At the name prompt, I'll enter Regular Patch Check. I'll accept the policy Patch Check and select Raspbian Cluster as the folder. And I'll enter 10.1.1.15 and 10.1.1.51 as the targets, both Raspbian hosts. We can now launch the scan. On the left-hand side by the Raspbian Cluster folder, the number 1 is showing. That means we have one scan running. If we open the Raspbian Cluster folder, we can see that the scan called Regular Patch Check is running. This will take a few minutes to finish. The scan is now completed and we can look at the results. If I click on Regular Patch Check, we can see there's one host with 9 vulnerabilities and one with 4, all of which are rated as informational. This is good. We don't want to have a lot of high-risk issues to sort out. If I click on one of the blue bars, Nessus will expand that and show the types of vulnerability identified: Netstat port scanner and authenticated check. If we click on the first info link, Nessus will show a description of the plugin and the 8 individual alerts. In this case, we're being told that ports are open. I don't need to take any action as long as I can account for each of the ports. I'll press the Export button on the top right to create a report. The report can be created in a number of formats: Nessus file, HTML, comma separated, or Nessus database format. I'll select HTML and I'll select the sections to include. This report gets created and we can open the report, and here we have the report. This shows us the same results that we got in Nessus, but in an HTML format. Okay, that's a quick look at how we do a scan. The final feature I'll cover is scheduling scans. I'll select schedules using the link on the top menu. There are currently no schedules. Let's add one. We set up the schedule using 3 sub-options: basic settings, schedule settings, and email settings. At the basic settings, I'll add the name Weekly Patch Check. and call this a weekly patch check for the Debian cluster in the description. I'll keep patch check as the policy and set the folder to Raspbian cluster. In the targets panel, I can now enter the two targets, 10.1.1.15 and 10.1.1.51. Then I'll select Schedule Settings. If I click on the drop-down list at the launch prompt, I can see our options for scheduling: now, on demand, once, and daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly. I'll select Weekly. Additional prompts appear for me to set the start time and time zone and the day of week to run. I'll set this for 2 p.m. every Tuesday. I can also select anything from 1 to 20 weeks as the interval between runs using the repeat every prompt. I'll leave that as weekly. I'll skip the email schedule and I'll press save. The scan schedule is recorded and activated. As soon as the start time is reached, the scan will commence, and we'll see a number against the scans menu link at the top and by the Raspbian cluster folder, just like we did with a manual scan. That's it. We've taken a quick tour through Nessus and learnt how to set up a policy and run or schedule a scan to check what vulnerabilities exist on our systems. There's much more to using Nessus, but for now you've learnt enough to be able to benefit from regular checking for vulnerabilities and missing patches.